In the bleakest chapter of World War II, Adolf Hitler became consumed by a terrifying vision, turning New York City into a burning ruin. This wasn't idle daydreaming. Nazi engineers were tasked with building colossal long-range aircraft capable of crossing the Atlantic, striking American soil, and making it back to Europe. So just how close did they come to pulling it off? Some accounts suggest one of these planes may have actually reached the skies over New York. Hitler wasn't only waging war on the battlefield. He was fighting a psychological battle inside his own head. He was captivated, almost thrilled, by the image of enemy cities in flames. By all accounts, he would screen footage of devastated Warsaw or burning London like a man watching entertainment. And towering above all his dark fantasies was one city, New York. He was convinced that a strike on America's most iconic metropolis would shatter U.S. resolve and push the country out of the war entirely. The concept wasn't born overnight. As far back as 1938, German military planners had quietly discussed the idea of a transatlantic bomber, a machine powerful enough to cross an ocean, cause catastrophic damage, and return home. But it wasn't until early 1942, when the United States formally entered the conflict, that the idea took on real urgency, officially dubbed the America Bomber Project. The program pushed German aviation engineering to its breaking point. Multiple designs were submitted, and some advanced all the way to prototype stage. The competition was fierce, the stakes enormous, and the goal was to hand Hitler the weapon he craved most. One aircraft quickly emerged as the leading candidate, a massive, futuristic design from Messerschmitt, what would become known as the Me-264, or simply the America Bomber. When Hitler demanded a plane that could reach across the Atlantic, Messerschmitt responded with a bold answer: the Me-264. On paper, it was everything the Reich had imagined. A hulking, four-engine bomber with a rounded fuselage and a sleek nose that looked like it belonged to a future decade. This was more than a weapon. It was intended to function as a home in the sky. Crew quarters included bunk beds and a small cooking area, as though the designers expected pilots to live aboard for days at a stretch. But beneath its forward-looking exterior, the Me-264 was riddled with problems. Its original Junkers Jumo 20-foot engines lacked the raw power required to haul such a heavy aircraft across an ocean. Swapping them for BMW engines helped, but not enough. Test flights revealed sluggish handling, poor stability, and takeoffs that bordered on dangerous. The wings struggled under the aircraft's enormous weight, and the resulting drag left the bomber crawling through the sky, an easy target for Allied interceptors. To make things worse, the first prototype flew without any weapons or armor at all. Later attempts to add defensive gun turrets only robbed the plane of precious fuel capacity, the one resource it could least afford to sacrifice. By 1943, Germany's Navy had already written off the project, turning its attention to competing Junkers designs. The Luftwaffe soon followed, redirecting resources toward other aircraft and eventually toward jets. In the end, the Me-264 story concluded in wreckage. Allied bombing raids destroyed the second prototype, left the first badly damaged, and the unfinished third was scrapped before it ever flew. Hitler's most promising instrument of transatlantic terror had come to nothing. But Germany wasn't done. Another manufacturer stepped forward with an even bolder design, and one that would ignite some of the most enduring mysteries of the entire war. Where the Me-264 had disappointed, the Junkers Ju-390 arrived with an air of almost mythical possibility. A massive six-engine aircraft, it was conceived as an enlarged evolution of the Ju-2090, designed for extreme-range reconnaissance and heavy bombing. Only two prototypes were ever constructed, but the stories surrounding them grew far larger than the machines themselves. Test flights began in late 1943 and initial reports were encouraging. That's where the verifiable history ends and the legends begin. Some historians argue the aircraft was barely put through its paces. Others contend it flew thousands of miles, over the Mediterranean, across Europe, possibly even as far as South Africa. Then came the most explosive claim of all, that a Ju-390 secretly crossed the Atlantic in 1944 and came within eyeshot of New York City. A British aviation publication in the 1950s reported that prisoners of war had described a successful 32-hour reconnaissance mission flown just off the American coastline. The story was explosive, and fiercely disputed. British intelligence found no supporting documentation, yet scattered first-hand accounts continued to surface. Pilots who swore they had flown the aircraft on long-range missions, writers who suggested it may have ventured near Japanese airspace, enthusiasts who insisted Allied observers had tracked it far from German territory. The truth remains elusive to this day. Did the Ju-390 genuinely have the reach to approach American shores? Or is it a wartime myth, stretched by fear and propaganda into something it never was? What's certain is that the program was canceled in 1944, and both prototypes were dismantled or destroyed before Allied forces could examine them. The legend, however, never faded. The mere idea of a German bomber loitering above New York, even briefly, was enough to keep the story alive for generations. As the Ju-390 slipped into rumor, German engineers pivoted once more. This time to something even more audacious. Just as it seemed German aviation had hit a wall, the Focke-Wulf Company unveiled a design that seemed to belong to a different era entirely. The Ta-400 wasn't simply a long-range bomber. It was a flying superweapon. Powered by 6 massive BMW radial engines, with plans to add 2 jet engines for additional thrust, the aircraft was engineered with one goal in mind: planetary reach. On paper, it could cover up to 14,000 kilometers, more than enough to cross the Atlantic, strike New York, and continue onward. Everything about the Ta-400 was extreme. A pressurized cockpit connected to a tail turret via an internal passage. Shoulder-mounted wings with a pronounced upward angle. An arsenal of 10 heavy cannons and multiple machine guns arranged in remotely operated turrets. A bomb capacity exceeding 50,000 pounds. Roughly double that of most Allied bombers. On paper, this was the definitive America bomber. Reality told a different story. Constructing the Ta-400 demanded enormous quantities of labor, raw materials, and industrial capacity that a war-strained Germany simply couldn't provide by 1943. Much of the design work was contracted out to factories in occupied France and subcontractors in Italy. Even so, the financial burden was unsustainable. Before the year was out, the Reich Aviation Ministry canceled the program, deeming it an unaffordable fantasy at a moment when Germany was fighting for its survival. Whispers persisted that designer Kurt Tank attempted to quietly continue development using Italian funding, but whether those rumors held any truth, one fact was undeniable. The Ta-400 never left the drawing board. With Germany's 6-engine dream extinguished, one final competitor remained, and this one would trigger bitter internal warfare within the Nazi high command itself. While Messerschmitt and Junkers commanded the spotlight, Heinkel had been quietly advancing its own candidate, the HE-270. On paper, it held real promise. A redesigned evolution of the notoriously troubled HE-7070. The new version replaced the original's problematic coupled engines with 4 conventional, more dependable power plants. With a wingspan of 40 meters and a projected range exceeding 11,000 kilometers, the HE-277 could have matched or outperformed the Me-264 in endurance. But the project was undone not by engineering, but by ego and politics. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, the Luftwaffe's commander, had grown bitterly hostile toward Heinkel following a string of earlier failures. He reportedly barred the company from pursuing any new projects until they resolved the HE-77's well-documented disasters. Ernst Heinkel himself was forced to go directly to Hitler to secure even basic approval for the HE-277's development. And even then, backing was lukewarm and funding scarce. The few prototypes that took shape were incomplete shells, unlikely ever to take flight. And so, one by one, every contender in Hitler's transatlantic bomber race collapsed, undone by engineering limitations, resource shortages, political rivalries, and the relentless pressure of a war Germany was losing. The America Bomber Project, conceived to bring New York to its knees, never produced a single aircraft capable of reaching American shores. The dream of striking America from the skies remained exactly that, a dream.